My name is Miriam E. Downs, and I'm 31 years old. My boyfriend, well, former boyfriend now, was Lucas, 28. We had been together a little over 3 years and living together for 1. From the outside, we probably looked stable. Good jobs, nice apartment, no explosive fights, the kind of couple people assume will eventually get married simply because nothing obvious is wrong. But beneath the surface, there was always this quiet tension, like I was constantly auditioning to be enough for him. Lucas had a way of speaking that turned every comment into a critique without ever raising his voice. If I came home tired after work, he'd say I lacked ambition lately. If I wanted to stay in instead of going out, he'd sigh and say I was getting boring. If I asked for reassurance about our relationship, he would tilt his head slightly and say I was being needy. Not loudly, worse, calmly, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. Last Thursday night, he dropped the sentence that ended everything. We were sitting on the couch. He was scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. Without warning, he said, "I've been thinking." That phrase never leads anywhere good. "I think we should open the relationship," he continued casually. "I need to relieve myself." Those were his exact words. I laughed at first because the phrasing sounded so ridiculous I assumed he was joking. When I realized he wasn't, I asked him what he meant. He rolled his eyes slightly and sighed. "I love you," he said, "but I feel stifled. Monogamy is starting to feel unnatural. I have needs, and it's not fair for you to expect me to suppress them." I asked if this was about someone specific. He shrugged. "Does it matter?" Then he added something that told me exactly how he saw the situation. "You're welcome to see other people too," he said with a small smirk. "Obviously, if you can." Something inside me went very still. No anger, no panic, just clarity. Because I suddenly understood something important. This wasn't a conversation. It was a declaration he expected me to accept quietly so he could continue the relationship exactly the way he wanted. So I said one word. "Okay." His head snapped up. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated, "if that's what you want." He stared at my face carefully like he was searching for the catch. When he didn't find one, he smiled, leaned forward, and kissed my cheek. "I knew you'd be mature about it," he said. That night, he went to stay at his ex-girlfriend Vanessa's apartment to give me space to process. He believed absence would create pressure. Lucas had always believed that if he removed himself long enough, I would spiral emotionally and eventually agree to whatever he wanted just to restore normalcy. But I didn't spiral. I slept. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind felt strangely quiet. No rehearsing arguments. No wondering whether I had misunderstood him. Just silence. And a very clear sense of what I was not going to tolerate anymore. I reread his text from the night before. "I'm staying at Vanessa's. Some space will help you process like an adult." That line did something to me. I showered, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table looking around the apartment. Every piece of furniture was mine. The lease was in my name. The utilities, too. Lucas moved in after 6 months because, in his words, it just made sense financially. He never bothered changing anything officially. Around 10 that morning, I called a locksmith. I didn't feel dramatic doing it. I felt methodical, like finally closing a door that had been swinging in the wind for years. The locksmith asked if it was urgent. "Yes," I said. He told me he could be there by noon. After I hung up, I stood in the living room for a moment with my coffee cooling in my hand and looked around the apartment again. This time, not as someone trying to preserve a relationship, but as someone taking inventory of her own life. It was amazing how different the same room could feel once you stopped seeing it through the lens of compromise. The couch I picked, the dining table I assembled myself, because Lucas said he was bad with instructions, the bookshelves, the lamps, even the ridiculous abstract print in the hallway that he used to mock but never replaced. Everything in that apartment had my fingerprints on it. So I started packing his things, not angrily, carefully. Shirts folded, shoes paired, toiletries placed into a separate bag so nothing would spill. It felt strangely respectful, which was almost funny, considering how little respect I had been given the night before. I wasn't throwing him out in a rage. I was simply restoring the boundaries of my own home. By the time the locksmith arrived, I had 3 boxes stacked neatly by the front door. He worked quietly, replacing the cylinder and testing the new keys while I taped up the last box. There was something almost peaceful about the sound of tools clicking into place. No confrontation, no raised voices, just one practical action after another. While he was finishing up, my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Just matched with someone. LOL. Guess this open thing is already working." I stared at the message for a few seconds. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed everything. He needed me to see it, needed me to react, needed me to feel replaceable while he played at being liberated. The whole thing was so transparent it almost took the sting out of it. Almost. I didn't reply. Instead, once the locksmith left, I blocked his number, then his social media, then his email. I stacked the boxes more neatly by the door, slipped the new keys into my pocket, and went for a walk like it was any other day. The sun was out. The city sounded normal. People were buying coffee, walking dogs, arguing about parking spots, living entire lives untouched by the little earthquake that had just ended mine. And for the first time since we started dating, I wasn't waiting for Lucas's reaction. I was done reacting altogether. He didn't notice right away. That came later. It took about 48 hours for the silence to register, which tracked. Lucas was never subtle when he didn't get a response. Normally, if I failed to answer within an hour, he would send a follow-up. Something sarcastic like, busy, or guess you're ignoring me now. If that didn't work, he escalated. Memes, voice notes, calls he would hang up before I could answer, just to make a point. This time, at first, there was nothing. By Saturday afternoon, he tried email. Hey, why aren't you responding? This isn't funny. I didn't open it. An hour later, another one came through. Did you seriously block me? We agreed to be open, not broken up. That wording annoyed me more than I expected. We agreed. As if I had enthusiastically signed off on some exciting new chapter instead of being cornered into accepting something he had clearly already planned to act on. As if one calm word from me meant consent to stay while he dismantled the relationship on his terms. Around 6 that evening, the front desk called from downstairs. There's a man here asking to be let up to your apartment, the receptionist said carefully. He says he lives there. I told him he didn't. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a notification from an unknown number. Miriam, what the hell? Why won't my key work? I could picture him standing in the hallway, shoulders tight, jaw set, already rehearsing the version of the argument where I was the unreasonable one, the one where he explained loudly that I was overreacting, being dramatic, making a scene out of something progressive and mature. I didn't answer. A few seconds later came the knock. Hard. Then harder. I stood in the hallway and watched through the peephole as he tried the handle again, then checked his phone like it had betrayed him. Miriam, he called. Open the door. I stayed quiet. Don't be dramatic. There was that word again. Dramatic. The label he slapped on every reaction of mine that made his behavior harder to justify. He knocked again, louder this time, then pounded with the flat of his hand. For a second, I thought one of the neighbors might open their door. No one did. The building stayed silent around him. Eventually, the pounding stopped. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. An hour later, another email came through. Okay, seriously, why have you gone completely silent? That was the first one that sounded different. Not angry. Uncertain. And in that moment, I realized something important. Lucas wasn't furious because I had changed the locks. He was furious because for the first time, he didn't know where he stood, and uncertainty was a feeling he had always outsourced to me. Sunday morning, I finally opened my email. There were 6 messages from him. The first few were short and irritated, accusatory in that clipped way he used when he wanted me on the defensive, but by the last one the tone had shifted so sharply it almost gave me whiplash. I don't understand what's happening. You're being really cruel right now. Can you at least explain why you're acting like this? Explain. That word used to trap me every time. He would do something outrageous, then demand an explanation for why I was hurt by it, as if my reaction were the true problem. I closed the laptop without replying. Around noon, my friend Naomi called. She didn't bother with small talk. Miriam, why is Lucas texting my boyfriend asking if you've had some kind of breakdown? I rubbed my forehead and leaned back against the kitchen counter, because I stopped responding. That's it? That's it. She laughed once, short and disbelieving. He's freaking out. That made sense. Lucas thrived on reactions. Anger, tears, reassurance, guilt, jealousy. He didn't care which one he got as long as he got one. Silence was the only thing he didn't know how to argue with, because silence leaves people alone with themselves. And Lucas had never liked being alone with himself. An hour later, there was another knock at the door. This one lighter. Careful. Testing. Miriam, he said through the door, softer now. Can you please just talk to me? I didn't move. I don't know what game you're playing, he continued, irritation already creeping back in. But this is immature. We had an agreement. Agreement. That word again. He laughed under his breath, the sound bitter and forced. Wow, so this is how you handle things? You pretend I don't exist? I leaned against the wall and listened. You know, he added, voice sharpening, most women would kill for an open relationship. I was trying to be honest with you. Honest, another favorite word of his. Always used right after something deliberately cruel. He waited. Nothing. After a long pause, his voice changed again, quieter this time. Why won't you answer me? And that was the moment I knew I had done the right thing. Because if this were truly about love or communication or even sex, he wouldn't be confused. He'd be hurt. Instead, he was destabilized. He was standing outside a door he believed would always open for him. And he was starting to realize that whatever power he thought he had over me was gone, not weakened. Gone. By Monday, Lucas stopped pretending the situation was about communication. The tone of his messages shifted from confused to aggressive almost overnight, like he had decided uncertainty wasn't working and defaulted back to the strategies that usually did. That was always his pattern. When reassurance didn't appear, pressure followed. The first voicemail that morning came from a number I didn't recognize. I let it play without picking up. His voice was unmistakable. Answer the phone, he snapped. This is insane. You don't get to just disappear because you're uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. I listened to the message twice, not because I missed his voice, but because it reminded me how often he minimized my reactions while magnifying his own needs. If he wanted freedom, it was honesty. If I wanted boundaries, it was insecurity. An hour later, another email came through. You're punishing me for being honest. I could have cheated instead. At least I respected you enough to ask. That one actually made me laugh. A short, humorless sound that echoed in my empty kitchen. Lucas genuinely believed he deserved credit for warning me before dismantling the relationship. In his mind, the announcement of betrayal somehow counted as integrity. That afternoon, I ran into his friend Vanessa at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me like someone who had been caught somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. Oh, she said awkwardly. Hey, I replied. There was a moment of uncomfortable silence before she blurted out the real reason she was nervous. Lucas isn't doing great. I nodded. I figured. He doesn't understand why you're ghosting him, she said carefully. He thought you were okay with the open thing. Okay, I replied calmly. I didn't say I'd stay. Vanessa blinked, surprised. That's fair. That must have gotten back to him because that evening he showed up again. No knocking this time. He just stood outside the door, leaning against the wall across the hallway like he owned the space, arms crossed, voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. So that's it, he called. You say okay and then vanish? I stayed silent. You don't even have the courage to break up with me to my face? I leaned against the wall inside the apartment, listening to him pace the hallway. You're proving exactly why I needed this, he continued bitterly. You can't handle real adult relationships. His words slid past me without landing. For the first time since we started dating, they sounded less like accusations and more like background noise. After a moment, his voice cracked slightly, not with sadness, but frustration. Why won't you react? That question told me everything. Lucas didn't want answers. He wanted control. And control requires participation from the other person. Without it, the entire performance collapses. By Tuesday, the messages changed again. First came guilt. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. I thought you were different. Then nostalgia. Remember our trip to Portland? You said I was your person. I didn't respond. What surprised me wasn't how desperate the messages became. It was how familiar the pattern looked once I stepped outside of it. Lucas wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to pull me back into his orbit. Any reaction would have worked. Anger, jealousy, even a fight. Silence was the only thing he couldn't manipulate. That afternoon, another email arrived with an attachment. A screenshot. His dating profile. New photos. A bio that read, Exploring Freedom. Under the screenshot, he had written one sentence. This is what you're choosing to walk away from. That was the first message all week that made me feel something. Not jealousy, not regret, just clarity. Because suddenly the entire situation made sense in a way it hadn't before. The open relationship had never been about sex. It was about validation. Lucas wanted to explore whoever he wanted while still knowing I would be exactly where he left me. The stable option, the emotional home base, the insurance policy. That night he showed up again. This time he knocked once. Lightly. Miriam, he said through the door. You're being cruel. No yelling. Just venom. You could have just broken up with me instead of playing these games. Games. I almost opened the door. Almost explained. Almost defended myself. Then I caught the thought mid-spiral and let it go. I gave you honesty, he continued. And this is how you repay me? Silence. His breathing changed on the other side of the door. Sharper now. So what? He snapped. You're just done? I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing his emotions. I wasn't fixing anything. I was simply finished. He waited. Then quieter, angrier. Say something. I didn't. And in that moment, he finally understood something that had been impossible for him to accept all week. This wasn't a phase. It was an ending. Wednesday was the day Lucas stopped pretending the situation was about communication and started revealing, almost by accident, what it had really been about all along. The voicemail that morning came from yet another number I didn't recognize. His voice sounded different this time. Not loud, not confused, but sharp and controlled in the way he used when he wanted to sound superior. "Miriam, this is ridiculous," he said. "You don't get to punish me because you're insecure. If you wanted to break up, you should have just said so instead of hiding like a child." I listened to about half of it before deleting the message. Not out of anger, just disinterest. An hour later, another email arrived, this time sent from his work address. The subject line read simply, "You're humiliating me." The message itself was shorter than the others. "People are asking questions. Do you enjoy making me look crazy?" That one almost earned a reply. Not because I wanted to argue, but because the framing fascinated me. In his mind, my silence wasn't a boundary. It was an attack on his image. The idea that I might simply be done participating in his version of the relationship didn't seem to exist as a possibility. Around lunchtime, a mutual friend texted me, "Hey, Lucas says you've emotionally shut down and you're stonewalling him to regain control." I stared at the message for a moment and felt something close to amusement. The projection was almost impressive. I typed a single sentence back. He asked to open the relationship. I said okay and stepped out of it. That was the entire explanation. Within an hour, my phone buzzed again. A new number. "Lucas." "So that's the story you're telling now," he wrote. "That I forced you into this?" I didn't answer. He followed immediately with another message. "You're really okay letting everyone think I'm the villain?" I turned the phone face down on the table. What he still didn't understand was that I wasn't telling a story at all. I had simply stopped editing his. That evening he showed up again, but this time he didn't knock. He leaned against the doorframe across the hallway, voice loud enough to echo down the corridor. "You know what your problem is?" he said. "You can't handle women who know what they want." I stayed quiet on the other side of the door. He laughed bitterly. "I was honest with you. Most guys would have begged me to stay. You just disappeared." After a pause, his voice softened slightly, but the edge was still there. "You don't get to take the moral high ground when you didn't even fight." That line used to work on me. It used to trigger a long explanation where I tried to prove I cared. This time it landed differently, because suddenly I understood something clearly. Lucas didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience, and for the first time, he didn't have one. Thursday was when the silence began interfering with his schedule. He emailed me again, longer this time, structured like an argument he had clearly rehearsed. "Adults talk through problems," he wrote. "If you wanted to end things, you should have said it instead of vanishing." That sentence revealed more than he intended. He wasn't upset that the relationship ended. He was upset that it ended outside his control. What he really wanted was a breakup, where he remained the center of the story, where I reacted loudly enough to confirm his importance before leaving. That afternoon, my neighbor stopped me in the hallway. "Hey," he said hesitantly. "Your boyfriend was asking when you're usually home," I corrected him automatically. "Ex-boyfriend, and he doesn't live here." My neighbor nodded slowly. "Yeah." He seemed confused about that. Confused. That word again. Lucas wasn't confused about what he had said that night on the couch. He was confused about why his words had consequences. That evening he tried a new tactic. Another number. Another text. "Can we at least talk like adults? I don't even know if we're broken up. You going silent isn't fair." I read the message twice before replying with the first thing I had written to him all week. "You asked for freedom. I gave it to both of us." His answer came instantly. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." The typing bubble appeared again, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, nothing. For the first time since this started, he didn't have a follow-up line prepared. Friday night, close to 11, the final message arrived. Another unfamiliar number. "So this is really how it ends. You don't even care enough to be mad." That sentence sat with me for a moment, because it revealed exactly what he had been struggling with all week. Anger would have meant attachment. Fighting would have meant I still needed him. Silence meant the opposite. 10 minutes later, another text appeared. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." That was the first completely honest sentence he had sent since the beginning of this whole thing. He had assumed I would stay. assumed the open relationship was simply an expansion of his freedom, not a risk to his stability. He believed he could explore whatever he wanted while still returning to the same home base. I typed a response, then erased it. Some conversations don't deserve closure. They deserve distance. I blocked the number. That night, as I lay in bed, the apartment felt quiet in a way it hadn't in years. Not lonely, intentional. The kind of quiet that comes from removing chaos instead of filling space. A week later, one final email appeared in my spam folder. The subject line was simple. Why did you go silent? I read the first line and closed it without finishing, because the answer was already obvious. He asked for freedom. I gave it. And for the first time in a long time, the freedom belonged to me too.